A roll call.
Chair Glines.
Present.
Committee members Hutchison, Hintermeister,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
Lovelace,
Here.
Edgerton, Oliver,
Here.
Brown.
Okay. And so Mr. Brown is on his way and finding probably that traffic on any afternoon is problematic coming through the Santa Clara Valley, and it's only getting worse. And that's scary. Okay, so the report of the chair. I have a couple of things that are kind of halfway intertwined and not directly related to the habitat, but just to keep you up to date. Land use in the Santa Clara Valley in the southern part is getting quite contentious, and so two updates. One, the Morgan Hill Urban Service Area expansion is due for a hearing on March 11th before LAFCO, and that's in the southeast quad, and that's basically Tenet and the freeway out there. And some folks believe that it's taking away viable farmland, and the city is moving forward with it, and encountering some opposition, but they're hoping their trump card of a Catholic high school here in Morgan Hill will win the day. We'll see. And then Gilroy has a USA expansion and annexation request that LAFCO took a very unusual step 2 weeks ago and sued the city of Gilroy over before they've even not even to allow a hearing before LAFCO, but LAFCO is saying that the EIR is just totally out of touch with reality. It's incomplete, has lots of problems, and so Mayor Perry Woodward of Gilroy and the developer, they have withdrawn that application at this time, and then two landowners have also, in another part of town, saying that the means by which the developers of the 721 acres, and that is along Fitzgerald, roughly between Monterey Road and Santa Teresa, that what happened is that their project was put in a back seat, and we're talking about anywhere between 4,000 to 7,000 new homes in North Gilroy, which is not next to any really developed area. So it's going to
question, Walt, on that one. So that project is on hold also?
That project is on hold now, but the Morgan Hill is still going ahead on March 11th.
So that whole annexation south of Gilroy is on hold.
Yes.
And then you mentioned another project in Gilroy, did I understand, or were they both the same one?
Well, it is, by moving forward, the city council on a 4-3 vote said if you, the developer for the 721 acres, if you pay to move this forward in planning, so the developer agreed to pay approximately $500,000 to the city to jumpstart the application. And the EIR, and I was one of the three people who commented in an EIR scoping meeting, it's they're not beginning to address the real problems.
Yeah, and that, from what I understand, that annexation for Gilroy was never factored in the take calculations for our plan either.
And I'm sure
so it would lead to a major amendment of our plan if they wanted coverage, yeah, for all their ESA, CESA issues.
Okay, and I didn't realize that. Okay, and so then the other is the most recent meeting of the governing and implementation board was canceled. Was that a lack of a quorum problem?
Lack of a quorum, yes. Yes. For the governing board, we need 2 triggers for the quorum, both a pure majority and representation from the 4 municipalities. We could not get a representative because Rose Herrera had a conflict, and she's usually the one that shows up, and we could not get anyone else from the city of San Jose. We've talked to the mayor's office about that, and hopefully this won't happen again. But it's a concern we have.
All right, and so that's my report. And other members, Dick, do you have anything for the good of the group?
Nothing to report.
No.
We're moving ahead faster. Then also, this is now the time for anyone, members of the public, to have anything to say if you want to say. Thank you. And then, so the first item of business is to approve the minutes of the November 5, 2015 meeting. Can I get a motion and a second?
I move. Second.
Thank you. All those approved?
Aye. Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. Item number 2, selection of the 2016 Public Advisory Committee Chair and Vice Chair. We talked about this briefly at the last meeting, and I'm willing to move forward. If anyone would like to step up, I would be glad to step aside.
Sounds good to me.
So,
I agree with Jan.
Yeah.
okay. So,
Of course.
can we have a motion and a second?
Move. Second.
Okay. All those approved? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 3, AB 1600 Development Impact Fee Report for the fiscal year 2014-15.
Quick question. Is there someone to be a vice chair? I mean, or did we? Oh, it's the same?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
we'll just carry on.
It's the slate.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry about
Should
that.
we break it down? Just
No,
It
no,
can
it's
be
okay.
one.
Yeah. I missed that, sorry.
No, we were, communicating, brain. Okay, so the impact fee report.
Yes, good evening, Public Advisory Committee members. The recommended action, this is the AB 1600 Development Impact Fee Report for fiscal year 14-15. The recommended action is to review the AB 1600 Development Impact Fee Report for fiscal year 2014-15. In 1987, the state enacted Assembly Bill number 1600, adding section 66,000 to the government code. This law requires that any jurisdiction imposing development impact fees must report certain information each year. In accordance with this requirement, staff is presenting the annual impact fee report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2015. In April 2013, a joint exercise of powers agreement was formed creating the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency. During fiscal year 2014-15, the Habitat Agency commenced operation and impact fees were assessed and permits were issued for project-specific impacts to habitat plan species. The attached report includes the AB 1600 Development Impact Fee Report, a description of the fee funds, a schedule of fiscal year 2014-15 fees as reviewed by the Governing Board of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, and a summary of the fiscal year 2014-15 development impact revenues and expenditures. The development impact fees collected by the Habitat Agency are used to fund land acquisition, reserve management and maintenance, monitoring, research and scientific review, western burrowing owl conservation strategy, habitat restoration and creation, program administration, post-permit term costs, and plan preparation. Attachment 1 is our AB 1600 Special Revenue Fund report for fiscal year 2014-15. Attachment 2 is a description of our impact fee funds. Would you like me to go over them all, or?
Is anyone,
No?
Is there any way that you can put that on the screen in front of us? Because I don't have a copy of the.
You didn't get a
document.
copy of it? Okay.
My copy.
Thank you.
Just one moment. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
I'm moving to attachment 3, which is the Habitat Agency fee schedule, June 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2015.
Yes.
And finally, our attachment 4, which is our 2014-15 revenues and expenditures. The funds, by the way, have been combined. We have reports that show general funds received, AB 1600 fees received, which is what this report is, but these are combined. And that's all.
does anyone have any questions? Dick, would you like to pause for just a minute so you can look them over?
Well, I'd like to kind of a recap, as it looked like we had total expenses of $1,747,000,
Correct?
and we had income of
$7 million.
$7,761,000.
Yes, correct. So,
And where do we allocate or pigeonhole the difference between what we collected and what we spent? Is it allocated to certain categories of expenses in the future, or is it just lumped together as a sum that we have as an agency to use?
I hope I'm understanding your question correctly. That is all included. The revenue is all broken down on the attachment 4, 2014-15 revenues and expenditures. It will tell you from the City of San Jose, City of Morgan Hill, and City of Gilroy, and then the specific funds are land cover funds, nitrogen deposition funds, serpentine fee, western burrowing owl fee, wetland mitigation fees. It breaks that out. So it's all very specific.
You were also asking about expenses, right? And how those are broken out? So those are by broad categories, and then in our fiscal year budget that was closed in September of last year, it's allocated by administrative,
Technical and permit, as well as conservation and restoration, and you will also see that. Those are the last 2 pages.
but we
of
can
the-
send you a copy of that, Richard.
And
Yeah.
I think I just to try to get a handle on it. As an example, we have a nitrogen cover fee. We've got in the budget or in our piggy bank. We have $205,000. And how much did we? That's what we have in there now. How much did we take out of that and use for that purpose?
Yeah, very little to date. So now that with Coyote Ridge being enrolled in the reserve system, we'll be spending a lot more of that money to manage the serpentine lands on Coyote Ridge. So this, you'll start seeing those funds being allocated specifically towards the category that they're supposed to be spent in. Some of the fees, the way the fees are split up too, is that some of them are set aside, all of them are set aside for administration, endowment creation, and reimbursing the co-permittees for plan preparation, the 8 years to get us here. So with burrowing owl, there was an agreement. So we do the surveys, burrowing owl surveys, which are a requirement of the plan. And we also do a management agreement with the Warm Springs unit of Don Edwards Wildlife Reserve. So we hire them to manage their land for burrowing owls, which they currently don't do. I mean, it's not like they ignored the owls, but we're paying them to enhance the land out there specifically for owls to try to increase the local population. So that's an example of where the burrowing owl fees were used specifically for burrowing owl tasks. Yeah.
Regarding the burrowing owl fees, has the city of Morgan Hill as yet deposited their funds into the HCP?
They did do one deposit, yes. It was close to $400,000 in fiscal year 14-15. They're still collecting the fees from what discussions we've had. And at some point, they'll be depositing the fees they've collected since they made the deposit in, I think it was the late winter, early spring of 2015.
Have they indicated to you, Edmund, if that owl fee that they are collecting on the city's part, which is in addition to the HCP fee, is that going to sunset?
Yes, from what I understand, when the general plan is updated.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they told me.
And would it help to get the money from them if we start charging them interest?
That's an interesting question. I'll take the fifth on that one.
Well, no. But I mean, you could say this was discussed because I don't think we're getting the money in a timely fashion.
It took those are fees that they collect, and they worked out some sort of agreement with, from what I understand, the wildlife agencies and Santa Clara Audubon to submit the fees to us. And we got them in a fairly timely fashion last year, but we haven't set up we haven't got them yet this year. So but it's a fair question. I'll talk to them about it.
And blame us.
Okay.
Blame me.
Yeah.
I mean,
last time it just took me talking to the city manager, and all of a sudden we got the money. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
I just have a comment as a new member on the committee. I appreciated the format of the report and having the background of AB 1600, so it helped me understand what's going on.
Good deal.
Yeah, we can send you all that stuff.
And yeah, it was helpful.
Yeah, I just had a kind of general question, just for my own education. I don't follow assembly bills and all that stuff that closely, but for this kind of report, I mean, who is the intended audience of this report? Does that go to some bureaucrat that checks a box and does some kind of analysis? Or is this really a report that's just required for transparency for like those of us to just see where the money's going?
Do you want to answer that, or you want me to answer?
To date, it has the second. It is,
Okay.
yeah. We have not been required to forward it as of yet,
Yeah.
but we are required to keep these records.
Mm-hmm. So people like us and the implementation board are, I guess, sort of the primary consumers, just to follow the money
Yeah.
that the head agency collects.
And like Dick's questions, is it being spent
Right.
the way it's being collected?
Yeah.
I think perhaps I might add, as a representative of the development community, they ask me, since you're on the board, the advisory board, is our money being spent wisely, because we're paying it in there. And so they're looking to me to kind of look at it and understand it, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I have a little trouble doing it. So that's why I really asked the question, so that I can legitimately say that I feel like our interests are being looked after, and not just add it, because next year you're going to add, increase the fee a little bit, and they're going to ask me how come we're increasing it, and what's
Right.
the basis of that, and I'm not sure I can answer that yet.
Yeah. So the way AB 1600 is set up, it's state law, that if we as an agency that collect fees, there has to be a nexus between our fees and how we spend the money. And so this is a transparency thing that's presented to our board. You're getting the presentation before the board did because their meeting was canceled last month. Normally we go to them first, then come to you guys second.
One specific question I had was on the income side. All the jurisdictions were, well, not all, there were like 4 or 5 categories. But then there was this kind of other category. So my question was, it was like 200,000, or I forget the exact number. But the other category, is that other partners, or are there other I forget what the category is, like Open Space Authority is, they're different category. Who are the others, specifically that?
Specifically, an agreement was reached, for instance, with Valley Christian Schools on Serpentine land. And they pay us an annual fee through 2017. And again, this agreement was entered into before Ed or I started. The agency hasn't been around that long. And so that makes up a lot of that. Another part of it was simply getting, and I believe you're referring to specifically, this $230,000, this $231,769.53 at the top, that's just titled as revenue. And a lot of that was simply carried over from prior years, and that's 1.5 years, the end of 13-14, or was it 12-13 and 13-14, and a lot of that money was given to us by partners or co-permittees to assist the agency in getting started.
Yeah, the reason I'm a little bit confused is, so I thought the way this would work was, so that's why a developer kind of showing up directly, that confuses me a little bit, because I thought the way this worked was developers would go to the local jurisdiction, Morgan Hill, the county, whatever, and kind of pay all the fees there. So then when I see the county here, I assume that's the fees. I sort of thought that was the fees that they had collected from developers. And then that other would be, well, I wasn't sure. Then there was no home for other.
Well, I can explain just sort of globally AB 1600 versus non-AB 1600. So there were letters written by the environmental community primarily for the new Apple headquarters in Cupertino, that project was going to lead to increases in nitrogen deposition. So they commented on their CEQA document, and Apple wrote this agency a check for $129,000, and it was considered a voluntary contribution towards the agency because they're a non-participating city, but people were commenting on their CEQA document saying the way the plan is set up impacts within the bound. So if a new development comes in one of the jurisdictions, that was it was modeled. It was the sort of how the nitrogen within the boundaries of this plan are generated and impact the surrounding wildlands and farmlands. It was modeled and cost out. But if you look at all the activity in the surrounding communities, whether it's Cupertino, who aren't within the plan area, big projects in those communities are also contributing to nitrogen deposition on farmland and wildlands.
I see. So it's really, so these aren't necessarily then even covered activities in the plan.
Correct.
They're kind of leverage
Yeah.
in terms of other developers taking their non-HCP path towards getting permits.
Exactly. There was a project in Gilroy that was a pipeline project. It was they allowed projects that were already in the pipeline as long as they got a grading permit or a building permit before August 1st of 2014, they voluntarily contributed $5,000 towards nitrogen. They just said, we're going to do it. We don't have to do it, but we're going to do it. And there was a couple projects in Mountain View that did the same thing. I think Audubon wrote letters to them. We commented on all the big development in the city of Santa Clara because they're having, as we've discussed. So if they end up, I believe they've already agreed to pay nitrogen fees. There's a dispute on the burrowing owl issue, and we wrote a letter to them saying you're impacting burrowing owls. So if they end up submitting, they don't have to submit payments to us. They could do it through some other mechanism. Apple could have not chose to. I don't know if people would have sued them. We wouldn't have. But with the city of Santa Clara, it'll be interesting how it plays out.
Right.
Yeah, on the burrowing owl issue, because they're impacting a breeding pair and they're impacting foraging habitat, which affects our ability to recover the species. I don't know how it all play out, but they could mitigate on their own. They could go to a mitigation bank. They could pay the Nature Conservancy some money to protect burrowing owl money, so they don't have to go through us. But it's just saying what is going on in your jurisdiction is impacting what we're trying to do here. So that's how some of the money was paid. Then we get that PSE stuff. Those are factored into the plan. Participating special entity agreements.
Okay, so that kind of covers, that's the
Yeah,
others, the PSCs.
yeah, and those are AB 1600 related. But that burrowing owl money that the city of Morgan Hill gave us, that was a voluntary contribution to us, because they were sitting on that money for a long time and said, why don't we give it to the agency? They're tasked with protecting and enhancing burrowing owl land. So we'll give it to them. They'll spend the money for us. But that didn't count as AB 1600. But all the fees we collect within the plan area that are directly related to plan area impacts, there has to be a nexus between the fee we charged and how we report it. And that's what you're seeing here, is that reporting.
Hey, thanks, that was very informative.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
I have one. Is there a plan for spending? Do we have we're collecting these fees from Morgan Hill on the instance of the burrowing owls. Is there a plan written down or something in the works?
Yeah, there's an appendix to the plan. I forget the letter, G or something, which lays out the burrowing owl strategy. And it shows how there's different tiers, and we're entering the Hail Mary phase of Tier 3 because the birds are in decline. So the money can be spent on supplemental feeding, can be spent on captive breeding, habitat enhancement, habitat restoration. There's really not enough collected to buy land in North San Jose, unfortunately. The land's too expensive. But the city of San Jose is going to be enrolling some of their land into the reserve system soon that has breeding burrowing owls on it. So we'll manage that land as part of the reserve system.
And so that money from Morgan Hill, that'll go to
Yes.
the burrowing owls?
Correct. And we're in some preliminary discussions with Moffett, the NASA facility, to try to manage that land for burrowing owls. We've just had some really preliminary discussions with them out there, but there's a lot of land out there that if we can reach an agreement with NASA, that we could help them manage it specifically for the owls. There's a lot of land use conflict out there. There's, as you can imagine, old military base and all. Google's out there now. So, but hopefully we'll be able to get in there and try to enhance the burrowing owl population there. So that's how the money will be spent.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Another idea in that, and Jess, you were quoted in today's San Jose Mercury about what's going on in San Mateo County, where the development right or the land was being sold. You want to explain the program?
Yes. Well, I mean, the article is about the Post going through a campaign to go out and purchase more farmland.
Post is?
Post is the Peninsula Open Space Trust organization. They want to raise $25 million to go out and buy farmland to purchase it, and then in some cases sell it back to farmers.
But not sell development rights.
No, sell the land without the development rights.
Right.
Yeah, so it
And that's
reduce the
key
cost.
thing,
Yeah.
that it keeps the agriculture going.
Exactly.
And it keeps it in permanent,
Perpetuity.
farmland.
Yeah, exactly.
Do we have any other questions? Could I get a motion and a second to accept the AB 1600 Development Impact Fee Report for fiscal year 2014-15?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously. And we'll take a break from the regular agenda and welcome Jess Brown, our newest member. Can you give us a no more than 2-minute spiel on who you are and why you're here?
Jess Brown, and I'm just learning the distance between traffic in this county. I'm with the executive director of the Santa Clara County Farm Bureau, and I also serve in that role and have served for some time in Santa Cruz County. So it's a joint effort to be more efficient in running the two organizations. I have had the opportunity to serve on various committees and organizations throughout my career, and I look forward to becoming more involved in Santa Clara County.
But you're also from the Merck story.
It's the three. Yeah, I should have said that. It's the 3 counties is now being run under one management. Yes.
Boy, you're going to put a few miles on your car.
So, but I'm looking forward. I've been in this role in Santa Clara County since April of last year, and so I'm really looking forward to continuing to do more.
Thank you and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, if we can go on to the next item. To review fiscal year 2016-17 development fee adjustments. Edmund, is that you?
That is me. So, as you know, the fees go up automatically per board. I think it was one of the first resolutions that they passed when this agency was created. So fees go up automatically every year, or not, based on the CPI and the housing price index for the region. So these increases are broken down into the 3 fees that fund land acquisition will increase by 6.4%, and the other 2 fees, which are the nitrogen and the burrowing owl, they will go up 2.6, or excuse me, the serpentine and the nitrogen, they will go up 2.6% for fiscal year 15-16. So these fee increases will be in effect July 1st of this year.
Edmund, could you relate what the CPI went up and what the housing prices went up?
It's related in the report that is attached, and it gets into detail about how the housing price index represents a percentage of the increase, and the CPI represents the other percentage of the increase. And I think the CPI doesn't state it in this report here. I'm not seeing it.
Page 25, does it say
25,
2.56%?
Okay.
Housing price adjusted was 17%.
Yep.
Wow, okay.
to editorialize on that?
Well, from the development side, we just see fees going up all the time.
Yeah.
And I think everyone agrees with your, concern and that, because our costs go up, but, does it, part of the deal is that I think that we're an agency that's in its infancy and we don't have a track record, in that in a couple of more years, we should recommend or not to the implementation and the governing board that let's talk about this.
Well, it's an interesting dynamics because we look at the housing price index and there's no question it's going up. And one of the reasons it's going up is because the supply of land is going down. And as LAFCO and our own agency and other environmental agencies restrict the ability to change low-use land in agriculture purposes or fallow land to housing, that kind of impacts the amount of land that you have, so that the price of land goes up. But in reality, if there's no land available for the developers to buy, because we can't change the zoning because of LAFCO or whatever the case is, technically, our land that we buy for environmental purposes ought to go down because they can't sell it to anybody else. But I'm not sure it works that way.
No. I can, and Craig can chime in here too. Some of the appraised values that we've seen on private land that we're appraising for acquisition.
Unreal.
Yeah, a rancher can't afford it. Because we talked to some ranchers about some partnering with us on maybe buying. The Nature Conservancy hooked us up with a couple ranchers that might be interested in buying some land. They said, well, we'd be interested in leasing it from you. So the price per acre prices out the rancher. Jess was talking about the San Mateo program, and there's a reason for that. You think land is even higher in price in San Mateo. So South County, there is still some, along Highway 152, some of the land there is relatively inexpensive, I guess, for the region. But when you talk about that Coyote Ridge area or the area of San Jose east of 101 towards Milpitas, we're looking at land prices of $10,000 to $15,000 an acre. In the Coyote Ridge area, just outside of San Jose and Morgan Hill, we're looking at land prices $7,000 to $9,000 an acre. So it sort of gives you an idea of it's going to be tough for us. We're shaking all the bushes, and I'll talk about that in my EO report, of trying to get different funding partners to help us with land acquisitions, because there are willing sellers out there right now. You all in the real estate world probably know some of these already, but it's just trying to get the funding lined up. And yes, the zoning is restrictive within the foothill areas of the county, so it's not super attractive for a developer to buy them, and a lot of these lands, because of the price, make it difficult for organizations like ours to purchase them. So you see that reflected in the fee increases of the price of land around here. And it is a chicken or egg thing, Richard. I agree. As land becomes scarce, the price goes up, and the affordability of this area. The prices here remind me of, I'm from upstate New York, but I thought Toronto was an expensive city until I moved here. So, and then I lived in Sacramento for a while, and I thought Sacramento was expensive based on upstate New York. And so the prices here, especially up the peninsula, are comparable to Manhattan and Brooklyn. So it affects us all. We're victims of our own success around here.
Just to editorialize for a moment, is that how do we preserve, we want to encourage the preservation of agricultural land, and we're struggling to do that. And so you get farmers like those in the southeast quadrant, which we try to understand, and we look at that program, and some are very critical about it. Others are saying, well, here you have a person who owns agricultural land and is willing to set aside certain acres of that to preserve it in return for getting some other benefits, a high school or some other thing. And yet, if that gets totally denied, for us 5 years from now to find somebody else who owns the land who's willing to preserve it in agricultural use, we're going to lose the agricultural because the farmers can't afford to pay for it. It doesn't pay it. And so that's an interesting dilemma, and that's, I think, what the city council with Morgan Hill is struggling with. They'd like to preserve it, and they think they have a way that will preserve a certain percentage of it, and everybody else wants to preserve more. But if in preserving more, we in fact make the land so the farmer can't farm it, then we've, in the end result, we've actually lost. And that's the dilemma that I see.
And I know Jess and Kyle understand this issue better than I do, and they may want to chime in. It is part of a land economic land tenure. Organizations like ours, if ranchers or farmers are interested, we do conservation easements with them, and that's one way to give that farmer or rancher an infusion of cash. Sort of the trade-offs that you're discussing, that's sort of a policy decision with the city and a land use policy decision, But I think Jess and Kyle live this every day.
Yeah, especially the southeast quadrant.
The one thing is the value of the agriculture commodities that come out of this county, and obviously the counties south of here is pretty astounding. It's so it's still viable, at least certainly from a farming standpoint. I know less about ranching and how the drought has affected them and their ability to maintain their operations, but it seems like from the farming commodities, it's pretty astounding the value that comes out of this county and the neighboring counties.
It might be of interest, the agricultural commissioner just did a study on the economic contribution of agriculture, and that is available. It might be something that we would want to make available to this group. Yeah,
and maybe having, Jess, if you'd feel comfortable, or someone you'd recommend even giving a presentation.
I think it's very interesting because it's up to about $1 billion. So, yeah.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, I had one question about one of the fees that I guess I didn't really understand what's going on with it, and that was the burrowing owl fee. The burrowing owl, I guess it's the AB 1600 fee. In the previous agenda item, it did state very clearly that fee is basically conservation management only and no land acquisition. And then that kind of is carried forward in this estimation of the fee increases with respect to how the fee was calculated based on the two indices. It's only based on the lower CPI index of 2.56%. So, but I guess I was a little bit surprised by that, just because, land is one of the issues for burrowing owl. So I would have thought that our burrowing owl fees would have been going into acquisition. So how does land get acquired then for burrowing owls? Does that just come out of the land cover fees, or
there's suitable habitat for them in South County, believe it or not, and some of the even you look at the rest of the UTC property. Mm-hmm. If managed correctly, it's suitable for burrowing owls. I was at a Farm Bureau event at the Castro Valley Ranch 2 years ago, and I saw ground squirrels everywhere on that road driving up to Castro Valley Ranch, but no burrowing owls. Mm-hmm. And there's suitable habitat on the Sargent Ranch. Yeah. I don't know about some of these other big properties like Richmond Ranch, or There's some suitable habitat on county parks. So as these lands get acquired, we're technically acquiring suitable burrowing owl habitat, but the owls around here like to hang out in North County. So it's figuring out a way to expand the population, or worst case scenario, translocate the population. But the studies on that have been mixed and there's been failures, so it's risky. So, so the land cover fees are designed to buy land that technically you could say is suitable for the owls, and a lot of ranch land and even some farmland and parkland. I mean, like parkland, like soccer fields, are suitable for the owls, but it's just getting them out of harm's way in nests down here. They do overwinter in South County, and they overwinter in the foothills on both ranges.
But I think that's, I mean, you're kind of putting your finger on the burrowing owl paradox. That is, all this land, from the point of view of the burrowing owl biologist, looks like ideal habitat. But apparently from the point of view of the burrowing owl, not so good. But that's kind of where we are. Yeah.
And maybe there's a breeding pair somewhere that it's on private land, we don't know about it, and that could be the foundation of something beautiful.
I think that's the tier 3 point of view there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's why we're thinking of funding supplemental feeding studies to try to do supplemental feeding on overwintering habitat to encourage breeding in those areas. It's craziness when you think about it.
Yeah.
But it's been done successfully in other places, so we're hoping it'll work here. Yeah. So getting them more protein by feeding them mice.
Well, so not reinventing the wheel, are there other things that are working elsewhere that we should be looking at? Because we're beyond the crisis point.
Yes.
Burrowing owls.
We are, yeah. So we work with Lynn Trulio. She's one of the renowned experts. She's a professor at San Jose State. We're also going to have a experts symposium. We're going to try to get people from Canada and Arizona and other areas of North America who study burrowing owls to come here and speak. And one day would be a traditional workshop where the public would be invited, and then the second day would be like a brainstorming session with just us and these experts to look at ways of trying to turn it around for the owls. So the fees are high to sort of pay for all that stuff, all the tier 2 and 3 stuff to try to sift through the research and to do these management plans outside the plan area, because there's owls at the lake shoreline and at Moffett and at the airport and at Warm Springs. They're all outside. All those areas are outside the plan area.
Thank you. Any other comments? And do we need action to recommend the increase be in there?
No. It's just more to listen to comments. It's more for me to hear your side of things, and I would say, Walt, in March you could report to the board that there is some concern about the automatic increase. Obviously for us to keep pace with land, this is my bias, for us to keep pace with the land increases, that automatic increase is important for our sustainability. But I understand where it's a problem for the development community.
Thank you.
I get it.
Okay, so the next item is the fiscal year 2016-17 budget schedule.
Yeah, and this is the important date for you all is Thursday, March 17th, which will be the budget workshop. It'll be the same as last year. We'll do it before the board meeting. So I think we're thinking about 1 o'clock as the start time. And there were several members from the PAC who came last year, and that's great. And we'll talk about things like fee projections and expenses and what we'll be spending the money on. So we're starting to get more into the meat and potatoes of the plan of doing restoration projects and doing more burrowing owl agreements, hopefully doing a land deal with a private entity soon.
Oh, great.
Assume you'll send out an email on the details on that?
Yes, Angie's going to send out a FYI to the PAC and the 2 boards. She just did.
All right. Wow. Thank you. And executive officer report. Last time, I think we asked that you're working off pretty much a document in that be distributed to members either from the last time to be distributed post, and then in the future, if we could get that ahead of time, because not that I'm saying the first 55 minutes, haven't been.
Oh, time to go home.
We're not moving that, folks. I get more good nuggets of information from what you're telling us.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely, Angie will send this out to you. So what you're telling me is you want it ahead of time.
Well, it'd be nice because and then we could respond even ahead of time to say, this I don't quite understand, this I tweaked, and I find in other government agencies that I work with on boards that it's always for the chief administrator to know ahead of time questions and have a chance to answer them, because that my knowledge is limited, and so why spend the time of everybody to bring one member up to date?
these are just highlights of what's been going on since our last meeting. So it's just my notes that I use to orally update you on things. So it's not anything I'd want to be. I'm okay with giving it to people, but usually I prepare them a couple days before the meeting.
Well, that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, does that make sense to you folks?
Yeah, as long as you're okay with getting them, because I just wrapped them up today.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
And it may not work, and so you can say, hey, not in the report.
I added a couple things today because I said I think they would like to hear about endowment investment. So and we had a phone call today about that. So I said I added it. So it's just stuff that it's just an outline that I use to make sure I talk to you guys about all the important things that's happened. You can interrupt me at any point, and if I can get, we can hand them out to you, I guess, before the meeting if need be, or if I get them done a couple of days before the meeting, we'll email them to you. So.
Sure, you would like to have them done a couple of days before the meeting for the most part anyway.
Depends on how busy I am and how I procrastinated or not. I can definitely try to accommodate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lines, I also have a speaker card for item 6.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay, well, in this case, I'm going to try and add something, so that will work. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. Comment and a question. The comment is, since you did mention the Agricultural Commissioner's report, in the last month, both the Board of Supervisors Policy Committee, Hewlett, and LAFCO received a presentation from Commissioner Deviney on his report, and the County Planning and Open Space Authority then also gave a status report on the grant they received for sustainable agriculture, where they will be putting together in the next 2 years a framework that would then improve our chances of getting additional state funding for doing things like money for easements. So that's just information. A couple of weeks ago, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers came to town to do a public input meeting on their environmental impact statement for the Yagas flood control project. And one of the presenters was the regulatory chief, Tory White. And so for fun afterwards, I went up and said there was a rumor going around that this agency and the Water District were just thrilled with the progress that had been made since she took a temporary assignment out here. And she said, well, okay. At that point, she had 3.5 weeks to go before she returns home to Florida. But she said she was working on seeing if she could get some processes put together so we would continue to be successful after she left. And so the question for the executive director is, have you received, or do you have any expectation of receiving from the Corps process improvements or anything that might be viewed as a more reliable forward progress in the future? Thank you.
Good question.
Yes, and Doug, is something on here in my report is talking about the regional general permit was issued to us in rapid fashion after it languished. Yeah. So that's a process improvement already. Also, there's until the RGP is fully integrated with the HCP process, they still go through a Section 7 consultation between the Corps and the Fish and Wildlife Service for impacts to waters of the U.S. And that process, from what I understand, has gotten more efficient. I'm hoping when whoever replaces Tory continues that spirit of collaboration and customer service. I have my fingers crossed because we still need to go through the interagency review team, which will have to approve an in lieu fee program for us or an umbrella mitigation bank for us to effectively implement the RGP. So right now we have an interim mitigation plan that Tory and sort of a more customer service solution oriented staff was engaged in helping us to receive to at least start that process of integrating 404 and ESA impacts. So we still need them to, in that spirit that you noted, that continues, or getting through that IRT process and getting either an in lieu fee program or an umbrella bank will be extraordinarily difficult if we go back to the old ways. So the first item is...
Ed, before you start,
yes.
Can I just make a comment on what the gentleman just talked about, the SALCP program, in case those that don't understand, I want to clarify this so the board understands what that is. Under AB 32, when was that Schwarzenegger passed that a number of years ago, part of that was the cap and trade program to reduce CO2 emissions. And the Strategic Agricultural Lands Conservation Program is one component of that reduction of CO2. And the way they're looking at doing that is the studies have shown that agricultural land is a carbon sink. And so as part of that $1 billion first year cap or second year cap and trade income that came into the state, 40 million is going to go to agricultural easements and the purpose of it is as a carbon sink. Okay, that's a justification for it. And I've thought, because we have some lands that we're looking at using that fund, and we're starting to actively move forward on that. And I thought that there was a way that we could possibly coordinate some ag land with some nearby burrowing owl habitat. Now we can't fund it with the SALCP, but if you've got a willing farmer who is going to farm 100 acres, and there happens to be something else in there for the burrowing owl, it seems like that could be something that could be combined. Again, keeping the money separate, you have to be careful about how it was done, but I just want to make sure the board understands that there is $40 million on the table, and we will be, my organization, the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy, is looking at going after some of that. And I'm going to keep in mind about the possibility of working with this agency of trying to get some burrowing owl habitat.
No, that's a good idea. You know, Coyote Valley, and I know it's controversial what happens or doesn't happen there, but there is an opportunity right there to do what you're describing, because that's another area that has the potential for nesting burrowing owls. And if there's a willing farmer there who would work with us, I'd be open to that. Yep.
I have a comment to make on this topic. I saw an interesting program and then followed up with some reading on burrowing owls on ranch land, living in conjunction with livestock and utilizing livestock and the dung that's left behind. The bugs come, and then there's a source of food source for the burrowing owls. And I was surprised. I didn't really know that. I always thought it was mowed grassland with ground squirrel was the basic parameter for burrowing owl, but it's also interesting to incorporate livestock. This was somewhere in the Midwest. But
yeah, the Warm Springs, Don Edwards, they have grazing out there, and the owls and the cattle coexist.
If you think about the most efficient way to mow a field, is cows.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It's absolutely. Yeah, they use the squirrels just they can't make their own burrows, so they take over squirrel burrows. So that's why that relationship's important. It's rare for them to attack the squirrels and prey on them. So it's more of this symbiotic relationship where they need the squirrels to create the burrows for them. But the food source, bugs, is a huge food source for them. Yep.
Seems like it would open up opportunities in the South County for owl habitat.
Yes. Maybe we can put some owls on Kyle's ranch land.
We've had owls.
Really?
Breeding or just hanging out?
They were there in the summertime.
That implies breeding.
And you guys, the habitat open space has an easement on a piece of property that I know there was owls in the summertime too.
And I forget exactly where your ranch is.
We're on Kenyatta.
Okay.
But the other place was on Fraser Lake.
Fraser Lake, okay. Well, that's good information. So if you were open to it, well, I can talk to you offline about different things. I can give you a call to see about doing a survey on your land or not, if you're open to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, after a digression, you're up.
Yes. Owls is the hot topic in this group. So, PAC members, some serving 2-year terms, their terms are up, and if they would like to be reappointed to a 4-year term, if they so desire, we can bring that to the implementation board. If so, just bringing that up, that when the agency, so the way it was structured, there's supposed to be alternating representation, but since it was created very quickly and they wanted to stagger the appointments, there's some that are 2-year and some that are 4. So we have some members that, if they wish and they can communicate with me, independent of this, send me an email or call me, or we could talk after the meeting to see if they would like to be reappointed to a 4-year term or not.
And we will have alternating, so not everyone's going to go off
Yes.
at one time.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have a list of who those are? Can you say now?
Yes, I know who the three are. Yep.
Can you share it?
We can look at the cards.
What are our cards? They all say 4.
No, they say
No,
2.
two.
Guys, a bunch of twos.
Oh, just the ones I can see all say 4. Okay.
That's what that
Okay.
meant.
They grouped them together.
We segregate them.
So you'll communicate with Julie?
I will.
Okay.
Yep.
And
So
if anyone wants to sing out now, or
yeah,
it's available
yeah,
by
I don't want to
email.
put any pressure on anybody, however they want to handle it. But if they want to sing out now, sure.
Well, hearing none? you're
Yeah,
up again.
hearing none. So it's interesting you brought up the cap and trade, because that's the next thing on my EO report. So there's the California Habitat Conservation Planning Coalition that John Hopkins runs for us. So the HCP, NCCPs throughout the state, and that's HCP is a Habitat Conservation Plan through the feds, the Natural Communities Conservation, or Natural Conservation Community Plan Act through the state. So we're implementing state and federal law. So since the cap and trade funding is via the state, we're through our coalition lobbying Sacramento to expand the pie on how that cap and trade money is being allocated. So we're glad that it's being spent for farmland, and I think rangeland is also included in that. And one of the big things is, like you said, carbon sink, and also the conversion. If you convert ag land to houses, it's that conversion of the soil and the land itself and how it generates car trips. So we're trying to get ARB and the Strategic Growth Council, which manages the SALC program, and Cal EPA, we've met with all of them to make more of that $1 billion available for acquisitions through the NCCP process, as well as for just rangeland and wildland conservation in general, not just for organizations like ours, but also organizations like OSA or rangeland trusts or your organization, Craig. So we have starting to try to create local legislative champions, and I would ask PAC members if you have any sway with our local state representatives, that we would ask that you bring this up to them, and I will send you talking points. I'm meeting with John Hopkins and some others tomorrow to discuss sort of next steps in developing local legislative champions, and we want to involve the business community, the ag community, the environmental community to put this on the radar of our local representatives, that this $1 billion out there, that some of it will be set aside for not just wetlands and forest land, but also for grassland, oak woodlands, shrubland, desert. There's interesting research done by Professor Allen from UC Riverside that shows that soils sequester a lot of carbon. And so it's not just above ground biomass, it's below ground soils and root systems that also sequester a lot of carbon. And rangeland's a natural fit, because rangeland is not being the soil's not being dissed, and to maintain it, for cattle production is a win-win, we believe. And protecting oak woodlands and scrubland is also something we're trying, and desert land for the Southern California groups, as to try to get monies earmarked for that. So I'll be sending you guys talking points, and we'll love to coordinate with you and trying to reach out to our state reps.
Just a point, is the NCCP included in the current?
No.
So it's not included
No.
at all? So you're trying to get it added in?
Yeah, and we're
Okay.
trying to get earmarks for, in the case of this, we're just doing broadly, sort of rangeland, to make sure rangeland is truly included, and also wildlands that are included. They do have funding for wetlands, and they do have funding for forests through other programs, like conifer forests. And as you noted, the SALT program is earmarked primarily for farmland. So we support those programs. We just want them to broaden the pot. And part of it is the justification and the science to show that, in fact, these landscapes can in fact sequester carbon. So not just the conversion avoidance, because as Dick mentioned, it's pretty hard to rezone a lot of the county. It's a lot of the land, especially in the foothills, is there's between strict zoning and water limitations and infrastructure limitations, it's hard to build a couple hundred homes out there. So the conversion argument is, okay, maybe if you buy 1,000 acres of land, you prevent the conversion of it, and maybe that's 10 houses, or maybe it's 20 houses. But the argument is more in managing that land for carbon sequestration and keeping the soils, by not disturbing the soils, and managing it for fire prevention and stuff like that. So they want us to prove that oak woodlands and grasslands are in fact a carbon sink, but their biggest thing is they're kind of hung up on this conversion argument, and we want to say that there's more than just conversion. As was discussed, and you guys got the notice, we do now have the regional general permit, and it was quite, I'd say, victory for us and the region to secure this. The next step is to get the 401 certification for the regional general permit and integrate regional board actions in with the 404 and the ESA stuff. So then if a public or private project proponent gets truly fully integrated permit, it won't cover the 1600 permit, but that's usually not an obstacle. It's the 401 process, the 404 process, and the ESA process that's kind of prevented restoration projects from moving forward, housing projects from moving forward, bridge replacements from moving forward, you name it. So we have a meeting with the regional boards next, whatever the 9th is, to start talking to them about integrating their 404, the 401 process now that we have the RGP. And it's one of the things that a lot of the development community and the city of San Jose and the other partners their expectations are that will happen. I can say that it's not going to be easy. The regional boards have some misgivings about HCPs and how we mitigate things. So it's going to be a give and take, and us compromising and we're trying to work this out with them. One of their concerns about us is that we pick winners and losers. We do restoration in more natural landscapes or farm and rural landscapes. And we ignore doing restoration or enhancement in the urban mosaic, but there is opportunities to do creek and wetland restorations within the urban centers along some of our major waterways, and it's sort of finding those opportunities and earmarking some of our revenues that we collect to do some restoration in the cities, let's say along the Guadalupe River or within Morgan Hill, and because there are open lands, there's park lands, there's water district land, there is some private land that might be able to partner with a private landowner on a restoration in some of the urban areas too. And that's one of their big concerns, is that we collect fees and then do all the work in the reserve system. So it's sort of working out that issue with them. And we may have to involve the state board in helping us to secure this 401 certification. I've had discussions with the state water quality board, because since we're in the jurisdiction of two boards, they can get involved in that, and they have a little more big picture view on integrating 401 and 404 and ESA permitting. So that's sort of our game plan to try to get that integration. And we have our first major meeting with them next week. So wish us luck. So thank you. So as I reported to you in November, we were developing financial policies. All pertinent financial policies have been created. Some were executed by the agency. We didn't need to go to the board. The rest will be submitted to the governing board in March for approval. And I can so there'll be one is a fraud policy. Another one is a how we're going to pay the remittances of fees, and which is one that we adopted internally. And there's a suite of policies that I can go over with you once they're adopted by the board. So. There's also an endowment investment strategy and a grant management strategy, just a whole suite of them. So now I'd like to talk to you a little bit about endowment investment, because this is something where you, as our stakeholders and sort of overseers of what we do, this is very pertinent, that I think that your involvement and input in is important. So we've had preliminary discussions with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation about our endowment with them. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, which is a creation of the federal government, so it's sort of a NGO created by the federal government. They allocate money for restoration projects across the country. They also are the overseer of a lot of endowments on state, federal, and I believe even some land trust land. So they sort of serve the similar function to the community foundation, where they take endowments and investment in a investment portfolio, and then help with, and they charge you a fee for that, as does the community foundation. And then a third option that we believe we're not quite ready for yet is where we would go out to a private entity, so we call it the private option, where we would go through an investment bank or a commercial bank to do sort of the investment for us in various funds. That would require the agency contracting out with a financial advisor to oversee all these activities. And I struggle with my own 401k investments, so hiring the right person and lining up with the right bank would be sort of where we feel we're not ready for that sort of option at this point. So we're focusing on.
We might not ever.
And we might not ever, exactly.
Really, and I know in Gilroy, most of the endowment type things are now moving to the umbrella of the Gilroy Endowment Fund, and it's similar to, it's a smaller scale than with the Silicon Valley, but that seems as though the way to go.
and we would like to go with the Silicon Valley because but there's one hiccup that we got to work out with the board. We had a conference call with them today. They have two types of funds. One is which you donate the money to them, and the other is not. The one that is not, which they call a mitigation fund, and they have a couple other terms for it, you can pull it out of their portfolio at any time. That's only available for 501c3s, which we're not, or government entities that have eminent domain and taxing powers, which we do not. So we have to figure out if we want to donate our fund to them forever. And that's something that we're trying to work through. And we're going to ask if this is the option that we think is viable for us, then we're going to ask the governing board for guidance on that. And I certainly would ask for input from you all. We're not ready to make any decision. We're going to write out a very detailed report on this, on the different options. So the plus side with them is, and we're going to look into these numbers, is that currently they have a 12-quarter average on their payouts. So we would get a payout every year, and right now the payout is 5.5% of I'm assuming on the interest income. So that's quite quite impressive payout, and that's after what they said their fees and inflation. That's a lot higher than what NIFWIF is suggesting. And so we need to look at, well, what's the risk involved with, what's the investment risk calculations, and just, get in the weeds on those numbers. We have somebody named Bob Spencer, who's our economic, he's an economist, and he's the one that wrote the fee increase report, and he's an expert in this sort of stuff, and he's helping us out with this. So the payout seems really good. We want to get into the weeds on that number, but then we're donating the money to them, and that's what we got to sort of figure out. If with NIFWIF you don't have to donate the money, we can pull it out at any time. So that's the NIFWIF does have different risk portfolios, different levels of risk, so they can increase your short-term income, but there is more risk associated with some of those portfolios with them. So that in the coming months, we're going to try to sort of figure this out and then invest our endowment accordingly.
If I may comment. First of all, I was really glad of the three options that the Community Foundation is the one that you're recommending, because I think since the money is generated locally, it should be invested, so to speak, locally. I'm a big believer in the Community Foundation. I think that they manage their money well, and I know with the organization in Santa Cruz, we have 10 separate funds with the Community Foundation. I've been very pleased in both manners of an endowed fund or an agency advised fund. I think the real question is what the intent of the fund is. If it's never to touch the endowment, then putting it in there permanently is the option. And it's one way to say you're donating it to them, but really what you're doing is you are securing it forever. And you meaning the agency here, has total control of the earnings as to how it's spent. And you just can't touch the principle of it.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And to me, that's a true endowment, is you can't touch the principle.
And that's what our economist was suggesting, So, and because originally he was more thinking NIFWF, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And part of what attracted us to it was what you said. It's local money. It invests in local charities.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ed, doesn't the endowment isn't going to be touched until the end of the 50-year period?
Well,
Or
one thing with NIFWF or some other, if we were eligible for that other fund, so let's say we had an emergency on the reserve system. We had epic floods, destroyed infrastructure, knocked out roads, and then that was followed by fires. So it's just if we could never. So in some cases you can borrow from the principal to kind of deal with immediate emergency needs. If you donate the endowment, you can't do that, which would mean we would have to set up a separate fund, emergency land management and legal fund, and it's not something that we're adverse to doing, but it was never factored into our finance plan. We're also creating a rainy day fund, just if the economy crashes like it did in 07, 08, we can keep the organization going until hopefully things stabilize. So it's just that's one negative. Plus, if the foundation, if the performance of the fund, or if the management of the foundation, I mean, this foundation is one of the largest in the world, so it's less risky with them. But if things kind of went haywire with them, we could never pull out our money and invest it in something else. So
it's not all one, or you could have 3 pots. Rainy day pot, you could have a permanent pot and another pot. I mean, you didn't all have to be in one.
No, the rainy day pot, we just have to invest it probably with a private option is what we'd have to do. Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to get back a report on more details on that?
Yes, Bob and I and Jill will be working on a detailed report kind of laying out the options. So our employee handbook was finally finished this week. Now that we have Jill as an employee, and we've added a principal program manager who's Tara Donovan. She used to work for ICF, one of the consultants implementing the plan. We were fortunate enough to steal her away from them, and now she's working for us. So now that we have employees, we've got to have policies for those employees and performance evaluation forms and all that. So they have recently been created, including job descriptions, which we didn't have any of those either.
On that very subject, it just now that we have employees, we have things like retirement, and we have things like medical benefits and this kind of stuff. And where are we in terms of making ourselves fully funded from the beginning for the retirement? Because very few government agencies in California are fully funded, and some are billions dollars short, and the state is way beyond that, and they're not addressing it.
Yeah, we're not a CalPERS agency, so we're 401k like the private sector. Yep.
Okay, good.
So we get benefits or pay in lieu of benefits, and you can so the employee can purchase health insurance with that money, and the match on the 401k comes from that too.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So land enrollment. So this is the stuff that is sort of the good news story here. Coyote Ridge, as you all know, is now enrolled in the reserve system, and we're now in negotiations with OSA on who's going to pay for what out there. And there's things that clearly we pay for, which is species monitoring, species surveys, some of the land management activities associated with that, like grazing. So we're working out details on who's going to pay for the road maintenance and all that stuff, and we're making a lot of good progress with them in those negotiations. Public land enrollment, so these are the county is enrolling county parkland in lieu of fees. So over 50 years, it was projected the county would pay $25 million in fees. So instead of paying those $25 million in fees, they're enrolling over 13,000 acres of existing parkland. Once that parkland's enrolled in the reserve system, we'll manage it not just for recreation. Well, they'll manage it for recreation, but we'll manage it for species restoration, enhancement, and creation of habitat. And Clara Park is the first one that we hopefully by the end of this fiscal year will be, or I should say end of this calendar year, will be enrolled in the reserve system. I alluded to San Jose. The wastewater, or I should say the Sewage Treatment Authority, Regional Authority, I think their new name is. They used to be WEPCP. I guess they didn't like that name, so so they have 200 acres of land in North San Jose, which has been set aside for burrowing owls, and to mitigate their the regional authorities' projects impact. So they're enrolling part of that land in the reserve system to mitigate for projects out at the sewage treatment plant. And it's going to be somewhere between 70 and 80 acres that'll be enrolled this year. And that'll offset their project impacts. We also offer this land in lieu of fees for the private sector too. There's a process they can go through. So if it's a 1,000-acre site and they're going to develop part of it, they can enroll part of it to offset their fees if it meets certain conditions. So that's Coyote Valley, the OSA Coyote Valley enrollment's on hold right now. From what OSA has been saying, they're very busy doing other things, so they're still paying habitat fees, and this property may or may not be enrolled in the reserve system in the future. We're collaborating with PG&E on a land acquisition. They have an HCP for the Bay Area that will be approved, I believe, in the next year and a half, and they want to work with various organizations like ours to acquire land as pre-mitigation for their impacts. So they have the land already set aside, and we're in discussion with them on a couple properties to mitigate their impacts for salamander, red-legged frog, and butterfly, the bay checker spot. So that, given the cost of land around here, it's good that we can partner with them. I've had some discussions with the Resources Legacy Fund administrator, which represents the Moore and Packard Foundations, about providing gap financing for us or even grants to acquiring land. And we're talking to the Wildlife Conservation Board about grant opportunities for land acquisition. $2.7 million of the Coyote Ridge acquisition was Wildlife Conservation Board funding. And the reason why that funding was available to the region was because of the existence of an NCCP. So without the NCCP, OSA would not have gotten that $2.7 million. We just submitted a $2 million Section 6 grant for land acquisitions. It was submitted on Monday. Keep your fingers crossed. We will probably know sometime in the fall whether we got that, and that will help towards acquiring land. $2 million was secured for the Coyote Ridge acquisition, and again, without the existence of an HCP in this area, that money would not have been available to OSA to acquire that property.
So you're saying that money retroactively will go back to that property?
Oh,
or
no,
is this
sorry.
for-
No, the 2 million was application they submitted in 2014.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So this
is a new grant. Yeah.
Other property.
Yeah, this is for another one.
That property identified? I know you can't say which property, but has it been identified?
We've kind of caught up to the way everybody else submits these applications now. You submit a suite of properties. So we have 50 parcels that we've had various discussions with landowners over, and we submitted those suite of properties in the grant application, and they one of those will be used, the funding will be used to fund one of those acquisitions. Now, we have a couple properties that are high on our priority list that we think the money will be used for, but just in case that land deal falls apart, we can use the money for another land deal. And that's the way they've been doing it. Riverside County, East Contra Costa's conservation plan, everybody's doing it this way. And we finally learned we got to do it that way too. If we had known that, we would have submitted an application in the last cycle. So this is how it's done. So you don't identify one property, you identify a suite of properties that represent all 18 covered species.
And you've talked to all of these landowners and they're willing to do that?
At one time or another, I've talked to all of them, yeah.
They haven't made a commitment necessarily, you just inquired?
Yes, we inquired, yeah. And there's...
I don't know how that worked either.
Yeah, and then there's, and ones that I know that are uncomfortable with it, they're not included. But we've had conversations with all the major landowners around here that we know, they've either approached me or I approached them. And those are the ones that we're including, yeah.
Okay.
And reserve land management and monitoring plan for the reserve system lands is in progress. So we're creating a template for those activities, and then for each individual site there'll be a plan created for each individual site.
And do you contract that
Yes.
work out, or you're
Yes.
already doing it in-house?
No, contracted out, yeah.
Plan to have an in-house person do that, or is it planned as the contract?
It'll be continue to contract, yeah, yeah. You need a suite of experts involved with creating that to deal with grazing and monitoring and fire management. But the template then may allow us in the future to not contract that out, where if we have a template that identifies everything, we can pull from the template. We may contract out aspects of the plan, but over time, I'm hoping as we add additional staff, we won't have to contract that out, at least the whole thing. So, real briefly on burrowing owls. So the rest of the San Jose land, so the 200 acres, 70 or 80 will be enrolled in the reserve system. The existing 130, we're going to reach an agreement with the city of San Jose to manage that land for burrowing owl with a 5-year contract, I imagine. The city of San Jose's funding is running out to do that management in June, so we will take over that responsibility. And that's where the most success to date has been with breeding pairs and fledgling of chicks has been that property. So we'll be taking over that responsibility from the city of San Jose, and that's how some of the burrowing owl money will be spent.
I'm sorry, Ed. So you said a 5-year plan. Does that mean at the end of 5 years that city can now develop the property?
No. It means we would then enter it into another land management contract. No, the city can't develop that 200-acre property.
That 200 acres is permanently protected.
Yes.
It's just a matter of who manages it.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
understand that. Okay.
Yeah, they don't have the money to manage it for specific, the way it's been intensely managed for burrowing owls. Yeah. it's all that land.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I just didn't know.
There is 400 acres out there that is earmarked for development. We're going to start managing the Warm Springs property even more intensely because of the recent decline in the numbers of burrowing owls and chicks in the area. So we had a discussion with Warm Springs, and we're going to be doing more mowing out there, more weed management out there. We're going to try to do more work in some other areas of the reserve to try to enhance it for burrowing owls. So we're upping our game, and we did a contract amendment with them for this year. We'll probably be, and we're at the maximum of my authority to do an amendment. So any additional amendments to that contract will have to go to the board. So we're trying to intensify our efforts out there to increase the burrowing owl population at Warm Springs. Moffett, I already alluded to that to you. Hopefully we'll be able to do a management agreement with NASA, and that could potentially involve Google. We're working with a private entity in North San Jose along the bay to manage a landfill that they have done some commercial development on, and they're managing the rest of the landfill for burrowing owls, and they've agreed to adopt a mowing plan that we recommended, and we're also planning to do some burrowing owl enhancement on the landfill. It's because of the cap on the landfill, there's only so much we can do out there. But at least this is a private entity that's willing to do extra themselves, as well as allow us to invest a few $1,000s probably in enhancing the burrows on the property. And just to update you, we completed 3 RFQ on-call lists, so we can have consultants more. So we did RFQ lists. We solicited qualifications from consultants for scientific monitoring and surveys, restoration design, and appraisals. So these consultants submitted, well, there we go again.
The middle button.
It's probably telling us it's time to end the meeting.
Well, I was going to tell you in 5 more minutes, we're going to leave at 8.
And this is the last item too. So this will allow us to, instead of going through an RFP process every time, we can just choose firms from that list to do those that work, and we're already using it to have an appraiser do work on a land that I could have talked to you about it today if our board meeting hadn't been canceled. I could have at least alluded to the property, but since I didn't talk to the board about it, I feel like I need to talk to them first before I talk to anybody else about it. But it'll be agendized on it was probably agendized. I'm guessing, Doug, it was probably agendized, wasn't it? Okay. So if you want to sneak a peek at the agenda of the canceled board meeting, you'll notice a different property on there that wasn't on there before. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
That's it for your report?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Better interest in the community.
Do we have anything else for the good of the group? Then we'll adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
And our next meeting is Thursday, May 5, 2016. And then we also, on May 17, we're going to have a general budget session. March. March 17, probably at 1 o'clock. And Dick, you may want to come just to remind them there is somebody out there paying attention.
All right. They always love to hear from me.
No, but it's interesting that in the implementation and the governing board, they do get fairly involved in the nitty-gritty of the budget. And I was surprised at the how far they're drilling down. So that's a compliment to you too.
Well, thank you.
Dick, it was
All
nice
right,
to
so
meet you.
go home and we'll let the lights go out.
I didn't mean to talk to you, but I've been jealous.